"We're alone, let's do what must be done," whispered the Apache woman, given away as a cruel joke. The sun had barely risen over the small Apache reservation, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Dust rose from the dirt paths as children ran to school, their laughter echoing between the low, flat-roofed houses. The community was quiet but alive, a place where everyone knew each other's names, histories, and struggles. Among them lived a young Apache woman named Aita. She was strong, with sharp brown eyes that seemed to see more than most people noticed, and hair as dark as the night. Her presence in the community was known, though she preferred keeping her thoughts to herself, careful not to bring unnecessary attention or trouble. Aita's life was not easy. She had grown up learning the ways of her ancestors, hearing stories of courage, survival, and the importance of family. Yet modern life had made things complicated. Jobs were scarce, and opportunities were limited. Many young people left the reservation seeking better futures, while others stayed, tied by family, culture, and responsibility. Aita had chosen to stay. She loved her people, her land, and the lessons that had been passed down to her. She also carried a quiet strength, one that came from having witnessed hardship and learning to rise above it. That morning, as Aita walked through the community, she noticed the small groups of people whispering and glancing in her direction. At first, she thought it was just the usual curiosity that often followed her. She had always been someone who stood out, not because she sought attention, but because of her confidence and quiet determination. But soon, she realized that the whispers carried a sting. Someone had made a joke about her, a cruel joke that played on old stereotypes and hurtful ideas. The words were shared in a way meant to humiliate her, and though many tried to laugh it off, she could feel the weight of them pressing down on her shoulders. Aita paused near the community center and took a deep breath. She knew that ignoring the situation would not make it disappear. The joke was spreading, shared quietly in homes, at the market, and even online. Though it might seem small to an outsider within a close-knit community, these things grew like wildfire. The joke was not just words, it was a challenge, a test of her dignity and resilience. She felt a mix of anger, shame, and determination. She would not let this define her. Her family noticed her quiet tension at breakfast. Her mother, a wise woman with lines etched by time and experience, watched Aita closely. "Something troubles you, Aita," she said softly. Aita shook her head, trying to keep her emotions in check. "It's nothing," she replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Her mother, seeing through the words, simply nodded. She knew that Aita was strong, but she also knew that strength alone did not make the pain disappear. Sometimes, courage meant facing the world even when it seemed unfair. As the day passed, Aita went about her routine. She helped her younger siblings with their lessons, tended to the small vegetable garden behind their house, and ran errands in the community. But everywhere she went, she could feel the eyes on her. People whispered behind her back, some unsure if they should confront her or speak openly, others curious to see how she would react. Aita walked with her head held high, careful not to show the storm of emotions inside. But each step felt heavier than the last, burdened by the weight of expectations, both her own and those of her people. By afternoon, Aita found a quiet spot near the edge of the reservation, where the desert met the hills. Here, the wind carried a sense of calm, and the vastness of the land reminded her of the strength of her ancestors. She sat on a flat rock and let her thoughts wander. The cruel joke echoed in her mind, but so did the voices of the women who had come before her, women who had faced ridicule, hardship, and injustice, yet stood tall with dignity. She thought of the stories her grandmother had told her, stories of resilience and the importance of choosing one's actions carefully. Aita realized that she had a choice. She could let anger take over and act rashly, or she could approach the situation with wisdom and courage. As she reflected, memories of her childhood came back. She remembered learning to weave baskets with her mother, the delicate patterns that required patience and attention. She remembered listening to the elders tell stories by the fire, tales of bravery and community. Those stories had shaped her, teaching her that strength was not just physical, but also mental and emotional. She had learned that dignity was maintained through action, not reaction, and that the right choice often required patience and careful thought. This lesson became clearer than ever as she considered the events of that morning. Back in the heart of the community, life went on. Children played, neighbors exchanged greetings, and the market bustled with the sound of haggling and laughter. Yet beneath the normalcy, tension lingered like a shadow. The cruel joke had stirred old prejudices and fears, and some people seemed unsure where to stand. Aida noticed subtle gestures, the quick glance, the slight hesitation, the whispered conversations. She realized that her next steps needed to be deliberate. This was not a battle to be fought with anger, but with clarity and dignity. She could not control what others said or thought, but she could control her response. As evening approached, Aida returned home. The sky turned a deep purple and the desert wind cooled the land. Her family gathered for dinner, the aroma of simple, hearty food filling the small house. Her younger siblings chattered about their day, unaware of the tension that had shadowed Aida's steps. She listened, smiling when appropriate, but her mind remained focused on the challenge before her. She knew that she needed to act, but she also knew that the timing and method mattered. This was not about revenge. It was about standing up for herself and maintaining the respect of her family and community. That night, Aida lay awake in her small bedroom, the moonlight casting soft patterns on the floor. She thought about the community, her family, and herself. The words of the joke replayed in her mind, but they no longer had the same power. Instead of anger, she felt determination. She understood that being alone in facing this challenge was part of her journey. Many would not understand the weight of such a joke, the humiliation, or the pressure to respond with honor. But Aida knew that strength often required solitude. She whispered to herself, not in anger but as a promise. She would do what needed to be done, with care, dignity, and courage. By the first light of the next morning, Aida had made a decision. She would confront the situation, but not in a way that would bring harm or escalate conflict. She would rely on wisdom, community support, and the lessons of her ancestors. The cruel joke had revealed a moment of weakness in the community's understanding of respect, and she intended to address it. Her steps would be measured, her voice firm, and her actions guided by principle. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act rightly despite it. As the day began, Aida walked through the reservation with renewed purpose. People noticed a quiet confidence in her, a calm that suggested she was no longer a victim but someone in control of her story. She greeted neighbors, smiled at children, and carried herself with dignity. The whispers and stares still followed, but they no longer weighed her down. In her heart, she knew that the first step in reclaiming respect and honor was to face the world with strength, patience, and wisdom. She was ready for what came next, aware that the path ahead would test her resolve, but certain that she could meet it with courage and grace. And so, Aida's journey began. The challenge that had started with a cruel joke was no longer just a threat. It had become an opportunity, a chance to show resilience, wisdom, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Every step she took was a statement, a quiet affirmation that dignity and courage mattered more than fear, humiliation, or doubt. The reservation, the land, and her family would bear witness to the story she was about to write, not with anger or vengeance, but with unwavering strength and resolve. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Aida moved through the reservation with the same careful steps she had always taken, yet the feeling of being watched never left her. The joke that had started as a cruel whisper now seemed to linger in every corner of the community. People she passed sometimes smiled politely, sometimes stared, and sometimes looked away, uncertain how to act. Aida realized that the joke was not just a fleeting comment, it had taken on a life of its own. It had grown into a challenge that touched not only her pride but the respect of her family and the honor of her ancestors. She began noticing subtle changes in people's behavior. Her friends greeted her cautiously, their smiles polite but distant. Children who had run to meet her now hesitated, unsure of whether they should approach. Even her neighbors, who had been friendly for years, seemed to exchange quiet glances when she passed. Aida could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her, though she knew she had done nothing wrong. The experience taught her that words could wound in ways far sharper than any physical injury, and that social pressure could be a quiet but relentless force. Aida spent more time reflecting on her response. She remembered the stories her grandmother had shared, stories of women in the tribe who faced unfair treatment but held their heads high. These women did not lash out in anger, nor did they allow injustice to define them. Instead, they acted with wisdom, seeking solutions that were thoughtful and lasting. Aida realized that the way forward required similar patience and intelligence. She could not rely on anger or force. She had to find a way to address the situation with dignity, ensuring that her actions reflected strength rather than revenge. The joke continued to spread. Some people repeated it as if it were harmless, others whispered it quietly behind closed doors. It even reached some outside the community, carried by social media posts that distorted the story and made it seem more dramatic than it was. Aida felt a mixture of frustration and sadness. She understood that ignorance and cruelty often traveled quickly, while understanding and fairness were slower to arrive. Yet, she also understood that this challenge was hers to face. The decision of how to respond would define not only how others saw her, but how she saw herself. Her family noticed the tension in her more clearly now. Her mother spoke with her late at night, sharing quiet words of encouragement. "Strength is not measured by how loudly you shout, Aida," she said. "It is measured by how calmly you carry yourself, how wisely you choose your steps, and how you honor your own heart." Aida listened carefully, drawing courage from her mother's words. She realized that the first step in reclaiming her peace and respect was internal. She needed to settle her own mind before confronting the community. During this period, Aida also reflected on her relationships within the reservation. She realized that some people who she thought were allies were now distant, unsure of how to act. Others who had rarely spoken to her were now offering quiet support, showing that empathy and understanding often appear in unexpected places. This understanding helped her recognize that she was not entirely alone. Even in a community where judgment could be swift and harsh, there were those who valued fairness and justice. Aida made a mental note to reach out carefully, identifying those she could trust to help guide her through the challenge. One afternoon, she visited the community center, a place where elders often gathered to discuss issues, share wisdom, and maintain the traditions of the tribe. Aida sought the counsel of a respected elder, a woman named Nayeli. Nayeli had seen many conflicts and challenges over the years and was known for her calm presence and wise advice. Sitting with Nayeli, Aida explained the situation without exaggeration, her voice steady despite the underlying tension. Nayeli listened carefully, nodding thoughtfully. "Words can wound more deeply than stones," she said softly, "but how we respond to them shapes who we are. You have the choice to act with wisdom and courage. That is what matters most." With Nayeli's guidance, Aida began to form a plan. She would address the issue directly but without aggression. She would make it clear that cruelty and ridicule were unacceptable, but she would do so in a way that preserved dignity for everyone involved. Her plan involved speaking to the person responsible for the joke, engaging trusted community members to support a fair discussion, and using her voice to restore balance without escalating conflict. She knew the path would be difficult, but it was necessary. As she prepared, Aida also focused on strengthening her own confidence. She spent quiet hours practicing how she would speak, what words she would choose, and how she could remain calm even if others became defensive or hostile. This preparation gave her a sense of control. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear but the ability to act despite it. By the time she was ready to confront the situation, her fear had not disappeared, but it had been transformed into determination. Meanwhile, life in the reservation continued. People went about their routines, and yet the tension remained palpable. Some families whispered warnings, telling their children to stay away from Aida. Others quietly expressed admiration for the way she carried herself, though they were too cautious to say so openly. Aida understood that change often comes slowly, and that even small gestures of fairness or respect could shift the balance over time. This understanding strengthened her resolve. She did not need everyone to agree or understand immediately. She only needed to act rightly. One morning, Aida received a note slipped under her door. It was brief, written in careful handwriting. "We need to speak. Alone. Please come to the edge of the hills." Her heart beat faster as she read it. She realized this was the moment she had anticipated. The person who had made the joke wanted to speak with her directly. This was her opportunity to address the situation face to face, to make it clear that ridicule and cruelty were not acceptable, and to do so in a way that reflected her strength and wisdom. Aida approached the meeting carefully. She chose a spot where the land stretched wide, where no one else could overhear, yet where the openness of the desert reminded her of the strength of her ancestors. As she arrived, the person responsible for the joke waited, looking nervous and uncertain. The tension was palpable. For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the whisper of the wind over the hills. Aida took a deep breath, recalling all the guidance she had received from her mother, her grandmother, and Nayeli. She reminded herself that this was not about anger, but about dignity and fairness. She began speaking calmly, explaining how the joke had affected her and the wider community. Her words were measured, honest, and firm. She made it clear that ridicule and cruelty had consequences, and that respect was something everyone had to uphold. The other person listened, shifting uncomfortably under her steady gaze. For the first time, Aida felt a sense of power, not power over another person, but the power of standing tall in the face of injustice. She realized that courage was a quiet force, not a loud one, and that integrity was the strongest form of resistance. By the end of their conversation, the tone had shifted. The person who had made the joke expressed remorse and acknowledged the impact of their actions. They did not offer excuses, but accepted responsibility, understanding for the first time the weight of their words. Aida felt a quiet relief. She had not acted with anger or spite, yet she had achieved what she intended, restoring respect, making the truth clear, and holding the other person accountable in a fair and dignified way. As she walked back to the heart of the reservation, Aida reflected on the experience. She understood that the tension had not disappeared entirely. Some whispers would continue, and some judgments might linger. But she also knew that she had acted rightly, and that this action would resonate within the community for a long time. Her courage, patience, and careful preparation had turned a cruel joke into a lesson in dignity, respect, and integrity. By evening, Aida returned home to her family. Her mother noticed the calm and quiet confidence in her eyes. "You have done well," she said softly. Aida smiled, feeling the truth in her mother's words. She had faced a challenge that tested her patience, her courage, and her sense of self. She had acted with wisdom, and in doing so, she had strengthened not only her own spirit but the values of her community. That night, as she lay under the stars, Aida realized that this was only the beginning. Life would continue to test her in unexpected ways, and the lessons she had learned would be needed again. Yet, She felt a deep sense of pride and purpose. She knew that she had faced something difficult, alone at times, and had emerged stronger. The cruel joke that had threatened to harm her had instead become an opportunity, a chance to show resilience, wisdom, and courage, and she was ready for whatever came next. The morning sun rose slowly over the reservation, casting long shadows across the dusty paths and low, sun-baked houses. Aida woke early, as she had for the past few weeks, with a sense of purpose that had become sharper and clearer. The events of the previous days had taught her that words could wound, and that inaction could allow harm to grow. Now, she understood that reclaiming respect and protecting herself meant more than calm reflection. It meant action. She dressed simply, in the traditional style her mother preferred, yet her movements carried a quiet confidence. Every step through the community felt deliberate, like a statement that she was no longer simply a bystander in her own life. People noticed her as she walked, though some averted their eyes. Aida understood this reaction. In a close-knit community, the ripples of one incident could touch everyone, and she had become the center of those ripples. But instead of fear or hesitation, she now carried resolve. Her first task that morning was to visit the community center again, where elders often gathered to discuss important matters. She wanted guidance on how to address the situation further and ensure that the impact of the joke did not linger in the community. The elders welcomed her warmly, some offering gentle smiles of encouragement, others nodding solemnly as they listened. Aida explained what had occurred, including the conversation she had with the person responsible for the joke. Her voice was steady, and her eyes met theirs with honesty. The elders discussed the matter seriously. They reminded her that actions taken with wisdom and care often had longer-lasting effects than impulsive reactions. One elder, a tall, quiet man named Takoda, spoke softly. "Aida, you have already shown courage, but courage alone is not enough. We must also teach others about respect, fairness, and the power of words. This is your chance to show leadership, not just for yourself, but for the community." His words struck her deeply. Leadership, she realized, was not about control. It was about guidance, about helping others understand the importance of integrity and respect. Aida spent the next few hours planning her next steps. She knew that while confronting the person directly had been important, it was equally important to address the broader community. The joke had hurt more than her pride. It had shaken the trust and harmony of the neighborhood. She wanted to help others understand the consequences of careless words, to prevent similar situations in the future. This required patience, clarity, and careful communication. Later that afternoon, she spoke privately with several trusted community members. She shared her perspective calmly and honestly, explaining how the joke had affected her and the wider community. Some listened quietly, nodding in understanding. Others were hesitant, unsure of how to react. Aida understood that change was often slow, and that not everyone would grasp the lesson immediately. But she also knew that planting seeds of awareness could eventually grow into something meaningful. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, she had gained several allies who were willing to help support fairness and respect in the community. The next challenge came unexpectedly. A small group of teenagers, curious and careless, began repeating the joke at the local store. Their voices carried laughter, but beneath it was the sting of ridicule. Aida felt a flash of frustration, but she reminded herself to act with the wisdom she had been cultivating. She approached them calmly, asking them to step outside for a moment. The air was warm and dry, filled with the scent of dust and sun-baked earth. She looked each of them in the eye, explaining how their words could hurt, how laughter at someone else's expense was not harmless, and how respect mattered more than a moment of amusement. The teenagers were initially resistant. Some muttered excuses, saying it was just a joke, while others tried to laugh it off. Aida remained firm, speaking clearly and honestly. She told them that they had a choice, to continue spreading harm or to show understanding and kindness. Slowly, their expressions shifted. They realized the weight of what they had said and apologized quietly. Aida accepted their apology, not with anger, but with the sense that a lesson had been learned. The moment reminded her that change often comes in small steps, one conversation at a time. Throughout the week, Aida continued to build her quiet influence. She worked in the garden, helped children with their lessons, and participated in community events. Yet all the while, she maintained a careful awareness of the social dynamics around her. Some people began to approach her for advice, realizing that she had handled the situation with dignity and wisdom. Others, still hesitant, watched from a distance, uncertain how to interact. Aida did not seek recognition. She simply focused on doing what was right, letting her actions speak louder than words. One evening, Aida received another note, this one more formal and written by a small group of community members. It requested a meeting to discuss broader issues of respect and communication within the reservation. They wanted to address the tensions that had arisen and find ways to prevent similar situations in the future. Aida felt a mix of relief and determination. This was her chance to guide the conversation, to help her community understand the importance of dignity, fairness, and accountability. The meeting was held in the community center, a modest building filled with the hum of conversation and the scent of polished wood. Elders, adults, and a few teenagers gathered, waiting to hear what Aida had to say. She stood at the center of the room, her posture calm and steady, and began to speak. She shared her experience, explaining how the joke had affected her personally, how it had spread, and how it had influenced the community. Her words were clear, measured, and honest. She emphasized that the issue was not just about her. It was about fostering a culture of respect and understanding that would benefit everyone. As she spoke, she noticed the reactions of those around her. Some nodded in agreement, their expressions thoughtful. Others remained cautious, but their attention was focused entirely on her. Aida felt a quiet satisfaction. The moment was not about winning approval, but about guiding others toward understanding. She encouraged open discussion, allowing people to share their perspectives, ask questions, and express concerns. The conversation was respectful though honest, and by the end, the group had reached a shared understanding. Words carried weight, respect was essential, and accountability was necessary. Aida left the meeting feeling both exhausted and empowered. She had faced not only the initial challenge, but also the broader implications for her community. The joke, which had once seemed small, had become a catalyst for growth, learning, and understanding. Aida realized that courage and wisdom were not only personal traits, but also gifts that could inspire others. She understood that leadership was not about control or recognition. It was about guiding others, fostering understanding, and acting with integrity. As days turned into weeks, the atmosphere in the reservation slowly shifted. The joke that had caused so much tension became a quiet lesson rather than a point of shame. People were more thoughtful in their words, more mindful of their actions, and more aware of the impact they could have on others. Aida continued her daily routines, tending the garden, helping her siblings, and participating in community events, but now with the knowledge that she had contributed to meaningful change. One afternoon, Aida visited Nayeli, the elder who had first guided her. She shared the progress she had observed and expressed her gratitude for the guidance and wisdom that had helped her navigate the challenge. Nayeli smiled, her eyes reflecting pride and warmth. "You have done more than defend yourself, Aida," she said. "You have shown courage, wisdom, and leadership. These are lessons that will remain with your community for years to come." Aida felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced fear, ridicule, and tension, yet she had acted with integrity and strength. That night, Aida lay under the vast desert sky, watching the stars shimmer above. The quiet hum of the reservation surrounded her, the distant laughter of children, the soft murmur of conversations, and the occasional bark of a dog. She reflected on the past weeks, the cruel joke, the tension it caused, the steps she had taken to address it, and the growth she had experienced. Aida understood that life would continue to present challenges, that mistakes and misunderstandings would happen again, and that courage and wisdom would always be needed. But she also understood something deeper, the power to act rightly, to guide others with integrity, and to maintain dignity in the face of cruelty was hers. The lessons she had learned were not only about addressing a single incident, they were about how to live, how to lead, and how to honor herself and her community. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she felt ready for whatever came next. And so Aida's story continued. The cruel joke that had once threatened to diminish her had instead revealed her inner strength, her wisdom, and her capacity to inspire others. Each step she took, each conversation she held, and each action she chose was a testament to her courage, patience, and determination. She had transformed a moment of hurt into an opportunity for growth, learning, and leadership, proving that dignity and respect could triumph over cruelty and misunderstanding. The next morning, Aida woke to the soft light of dawn spilling over the desert hills. The reservation seemed quieter than usual, the calm carrying a sense of expectation. She had grown used to moving carefully through the community, aware of how every glance, every whisper could carry meaning. But now she felt a new confidence, a quiet strength born from the steps she had already taken. The joke that had started everything had lost its power over her. What mattered now was not the past, but how she could guide the community toward understanding and respect. Aida began her day with her usual routines, helping her siblings with their lessons, tending to the small vegetable garden behind her home, and preparing breakfast for her family. Each action, though ordinary, was performed with care and thoughtfulness. These simple acts reminded her that leadership and influence did not always come from grand gestures. Sometimes, the strongest impact came from small, consistent actions that reflected integrity and patience. Her mother watched her quietly, a gentle smile on her face, recognizing the calm determination Aida now carried. Later in the morning, Aida gathered the community members she had been working with closely, the elders, a few trusted neighbors, and some of the teenagers who had previously repeated the joke. She invited them to meet at the community center for a discussion about respect, communication, and unity. The plan was to address not only the recent incident, but also to create a stronger understanding that would prevent similar issues in the future. She felt a mix of nerves and excitement. This was an important step, one that would require honesty, patience, and the ability to listen as much as she spoke. When the group assembled, Aida stood at the front of the room. She began by acknowledging the recent tension openly, describing the impact of the joke and how it had affected not only her but the community as a whole. She spoke calmly, avoiding blame or anger, instead focusing on the importance of respect, understanding, and accountability. Her words carried sincerity, and her steady gaze encouraged everyone to pay attention. The room grew quiet as people listened, realizing that this was not a confrontation, but a conversation aimed at growth and learning. Some people were hesitant to speak at first. They glanced at each other, unsure if they could express their thoughts without offending anyone. Aida invited them to share honestly, reminding them that this was a safe space for dialogue. Slowly, voices began to emerge. One elder spoke about the importance of careful words and the lasting effects they could have. A young mother shared how quickly rumors could spread and how children might learn harmful lessons if adults did not act thoughtfully. Even the teenagers who had repeated the joke earlier shared their reflections, explaining how they now understood the weight of their words and the importance of being mindful in the future. Aida listened carefully, responding with empathy and encouragement. She praised honesty and acknowledged the courage it took for people to speak openly. By maintaining a calm and supportive tone, she helped the conversation stay constructive rather than turning into an argument. She guided the discussion toward practical solutions, suggesting ways to build a stronger sense of community and support. Ideas were shared, organizing small workshops to teach children about kindness and respect, creating spaces where people could discuss conflicts openly, and developing guidelines for social interactions that emphasized empathy and accountability. As the conversation progressed, a sense of unity began to grow. People who had been cautious or skeptical started to recognize the value of the dialogue. They saw that the incident, though painful, could be transformed into a teaching moment for everyone. Aida's leadership, though quiet and measured, inspired confidence. She demonstrated that courage was not always loud or confrontational, and that true strength often came from understanding, patience, and the ability to guide others with integrity. After the discussion, Aida spent time with each group individually. She spoke with the teenagers, helping them reflect on their behavior and encouraging them to take responsibility not only for the joke, but also for the lessons they could share moving forward. She met with the elders, listening to their advice and incorporating their wisdom into plans for future community events. And she spoke with families, reassuring them that the goal was not punishment, but growth, understanding, and unity. By the end of the day, a clear path forward had been established, and a sense of hope had returned to the community. In the days that followed, Aida worked to implement the plans that had been discussed. She helped organize small gatherings where people could talk openly about respect, communication, and community values. She guided conversations gently, ensuring that everyone had a voice and that differing opinions were treated with respect. Slowly, the atmosphere in the reservation began to shift. Where tension and whispers had once dominated, there was now a cautious optimism. People were learning that mistakes could be opportunities for growth, and that even painful experiences could strengthen bonds when approached with care. Aida also made time for personal reflection. She walked along the hills at sunrise, the desert stretching endlessly around her. The wind carried a sense of calm, and she thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. The joke, which had once seemed a threat, had revealed her own strength, patience, and ability to inspire others. She realized that challenges were not always obstacles. They could also be opportunities to grow, to lead, and to make a meaningful difference. This understanding gave her a deep sense of peace and purpose. Her family noticed the changes in her as well. Her mother spoke softly one evening. "Aida, you have shown the community how to act with courage and respect. You have guided them with wisdom, and they are listening. This is not just about the joke, it is about the future of everyone here." Aida smiled, feeling the truth in her mother's words. She had learned that leadership was not about control or recognition, but about guiding others with integrity and helping them understand the importance of dignity and fairness. As weeks passed, the community continued to grow stronger. People spoke more openly, treated each other with greater consideration, and took responsibility for their words and actions. The joke, which had caused so much initial harm, had become a turning point, a moment that allowed the community to learn, reflect, and grow together. Aida's role, though sometimes quiet, had been central to this transformation. She had shown that courage, wisdom, and patience could create lasting change without anger or conflict. One afternoon, as Aida helped a group of children with a project at the community center, she noticed the difference in their behavior. They listened more carefully, spoke more kindly, and treated each other with greater respect. It was a small but meaningful sign that the lessons of the past weeks were taking root. Aida realized that real change often began with small steps, repeated consistently over time. The journey was ongoing, but the path had been set, and she felt confident that the community could continue to grow and thrive. That evening, Aida walked home with her younger siblings. The desert sky was painted in shades of purple and gold, and the air carried the cool calm of approaching night. Her siblings chatted happily, unaware of the complexities she had faced, but their joy reminded her of why she had taken the steps she had. Protecting dignity, teaching respect, and guiding the community were not only for herself, they were for the future of everyone she loved. As she lay down that night, Aida reflected on the entire journey. From the cruel joke that had sparked tension, to the careful planning, the conversations, and the small acts of leadership, she had learned lessons that would stay with her for a lifetime. She had discovered that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act with wisdom and integrity despite it. She had learned that leadership was about service, guidance, and the quiet strength to influence others positively. Most of all, she had realized that respect and dignity could be defended and nurtured without aggression, and that understanding often grows from patience and honesty. Aida understood that the story was far from over. Life would continue to present challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of tension. Yet, she now felt prepared to face them. She knew that the lessons she had learned could guide her, help her make wise decisions, and inspire others in the community. She had transformed a painful experience into an opportunity for growth, for herself and for those around her. And so, the reservation grew stronger. People listened, reflected, and acted with greater care. They learned that words could harm, but words could also heal when chosen thoughtfully. They learned that leadership was not about power or authority, but about guiding others with respect, empathy, and courage. Aida had become more than a young woman facing a cruel joke. She had become a symbol of resilience, wisdom, and integrity, showing everyone that even the smallest voice, when guided by courage and care, could create meaningful change. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, casting a golden glow over the small reservation. Aida stood outside her home for a few moments, feeling the warmth on her face and the cool breeze brushing past her. The days had become calmer, quieter in a way that spoke of balance and understanding. The tension that had once clouded the community like a heavy shadow had lifted. The cruel joke, which had started so much pain, had become a lesson for everyone, including Aida herself. She realized that the past weeks had changed her, not just in the eyes of her community, but within herself. As she walked along the dirt paths, she noticed subtle changes all around her. Neighbors greeted each other with smiles, children ran freely without hesitation, and conversations carried a tone of thoughtfulness and respect. Even the young people who had repeated the joke weeks before now approached their daily lives with more care. Aida felt a quiet sense of pride, not because she had been praised or recognized, but because she had witnessed growth and understanding taking root in her community. She understood that real change often begins with small actions, but over time, those actions could ripple outward in ways that were powerful and lasting. That morning, Aida visited the community center, where a small gathering had been arranged. The elders, adults, and even some teenagers were present. The purpose of the gathering was to reflect on the lessons learned from the recent challenges and to celebrate the steps taken towards stronger communication and respect. Aida felt a sense of calm confidence as she entered the room. She had been nervous at first, unsure of how her efforts would be received, but now she realized that her actions had created meaningful impact. She understood that leadership was not about commanding attention. It was about inspiring others to act with integrity. During the gathering, Aida spoke first. She described her own experience honestly, sharing her feelings of hurt and frustration when the joke had first spread. But she also spoke about the lessons she had learned. That courage was not the absence of fear, that patience and thoughtfulness could be more powerful than immediate reaction, and that true strength came from guiding others with wisdom and integrity. Her words were calm but compelling, and the people in the room listened attentively, nodding in agreement. Others began to share their reflections as well. Elders spoke about the importance of preserving respect and dignity within the community, reminding everyone that words could heal as easily as they could harm. Parents shared how they had begun talking to their children about kindness and accountability, teaching them the value of thinking before speaking. Even the teenagers who had once repeated the joke shared their understanding, explaining how they now realized the importance of empathy, humility, and self-awareness. It was a conversation filled with honesty, insight, and hope. Aida felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had guided the community not through anger or conflict, but through understanding and dialogue. She had shown that even a small voice, when backed by courage and careful thought, could lead to meaningful change. She had learned that leadership was not about control or recognition, but about creating space for others to learn, reflect, and grow. This realization filled her with a quiet joy, a sense that her actions had made a real difference in the lives of those around her. After the gathering, Aida spent time walking through the reservation, observing the people she had grown up with and cared for. Families went about their daily routines, children played together without fear or hesitation, and neighbors helped each other with small acts of kindness. She noticed the subtle ways in which respect and understanding were now being practiced, how people listened carefully, spoke thoughtfully, and considered the impact of their actions. The community had not been perfect, but it had grown stronger, more aware, and more connected. Aida understood that these changes were fragile and required continued attention, but she also knew that the foundation had been laid for lasting improvement. That evening, she returned home and sat with her family. Her mother placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and said, "Aida, you have done more than defend yourself. You have shown courage, wisdom, and integrity. You have helped guide this community in ways that will be remembered for years." Aida smiled softly, feeling the truth in her mother's words. She realized that her journey had been about more than responding to a single incident. It had been about understanding herself, strengthening her community, and demonstrating the power of patience, honesty, and respect. As night fell, Aida stepped outside and looked up at the vast desert sky. The stars glittered brightly, each one a reminder of the endless possibilities and lessons the world could offer. She thought about the journey she had taken, the pain and humiliation caused by the cruel joke, the fear and uncertainty she had felt, and the courage and wisdom that had guided her actions. She realized that every step, no matter how small, had contributed to a larger story, a story of resilience, growth, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Aida also reflected on the personal lessons she had learned. She had discovered that strength was not about dominating others, but about standing firmly for what was right. She had learned that courage was not about acting without fear, but about choosing to act with integrity despite it. She had seen that patience and careful thought could turn a painful experience into an opportunity for growth, and that leadership was most powerful when it inspired others rather than demanded obedience. These lessons were not just for the community, they were for her, for the choices she would face in the future, and for the person she wanted to become. In the days that followed, Aida continued to live her life with intention and care. She helped her siblings with their studies, tended the family garden, and participated in community events, but now with a renewed sense of purpose. She also continued to guide others quietly, offering advice, support, and encouragement when it was needed. People increasingly sought her insight, not because she demanded respect, but because she had earned it through her actions, her integrity, and her ability to listen and understand. Aida noticed a deeper connection forming within the community. People were more willing to speak openly, to acknowledge mistakes, and to support each other in ways they had not before. The lesson of the cruel joke had become a turning point, a reminder that words carry weight, that respect must be maintained, and that empathy and understanding could prevent harm and build stronger bonds. Aida's role, though often quiet and unassuming, had helped transform the community's culture in meaningful ways. One afternoon, she walked along the hills at sunset, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink. She paused and watched the children playing below, their laughter echoing across the land. She remembered how uncertain, hurt, and alone she had felt at the beginning of this journey. Now, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The community had not only healed, but it had also grown stronger, and she had been a part of that transformation. The cruel joke that had once threatened to diminish her had instead revealed her strength, patience, and capacity to inspire others. Aida realized that life would continue to present challenges. Misunderstandings, mistakes, and tensions would arise again. But she now understood that courage, wisdom, and integrity were tools she could use to navigate those moments. She had learned that even in difficult times, one could act with dignity, inspire change, and create a positive impact on the world around them. These lessons would guide her for the rest of her life. That night, as she lay under the star-filled sky, Ida whispered quietly to herself, "I am stronger than fear. I am wiser than anger. I will guide with care and I will act with integrity." The words were a promise not just for herself, but for the community she loved. She knew that she had faced a challenge that could have left her bitter or hurt, yet she had transformed it into an opportunity for growth, learning, and leadership. She understood that true strength lay not in domination or retaliation, but in courage, patience, and the quiet power of integrity. As the days and weeks passed, Aida continued to live with intention and purpose. She nurtured relationships, guided conversations, and remained a steady example of courage and wisdom. Her family flourished, the community strengthened, and the lessons of respect, understanding, and accountability became a part of daily life. People remembered the journey not as a tale of humiliation or cruelty, but as a story of resilience, learning, and the enduring power of human dignity. Aida's story became a quiet inspiration. It was not told loudly or widely, but within the community, it shaped behavior, guided choices, and reminded everyone that words have weight, that courage matters, and that integrity can transform even the most painful experiences. She had shown that a single person acting with wisdom and strength could influence others positively, and that leadership is not about power. It is about service, guidance, and understanding. And so, the journey came full circle. From the moment the cruel joke had first struck her, through the tension, reflection, and careful action, Aida had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident. She had turned humiliation into opportunity, fear into courage, and a single moment of cruelty into a lasting lesson for her family and community. The story of Aida's journey was not one of vengeance or retaliation, but of resilience, integrity, and the quiet but powerful influence of a courageous heart. The desert sky stretched endlessly above her, stars shining brightly like witnesses to her journey. Aida closed her eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the connection to her ancestors, her family, and her community. She had faced the storm, guided others through it, and emerged stronger. And she knew, without doubt, that whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready. She had discovered the enduring truth, that dignity, courage, and integrity could light even the darkest paths, and that a single person, acting with care and wisdom, could inspire lasting change.